Hey guys, welcome into week 9 episode of Craze's Corner. Make sure you guys stay tuned for the discussion segment. Today we're going to be talking about players who had big weeks in week 8 if we think they can continue those on going forward, continue their momentum. Maybe they can help you win a fantasy football championship. But first we're going to start off with some news. The Henry Ruggs situation where he was drunk driving. He ended up causing a collision, which did result in a fatality. Unfortunately, she was a 23-year-old girl. Henry Ruggs was under the influence, had double the legal blood alcohol content, and he was driving 156 miles per hour. Henry Ruggs was released by the Raiders, and he will be facing jail time if he's prosecuted anywhere between 2 to 20 years. It's an extremely sad situation, but I think this should be a lesson to all NFL players, all athletes. Sometimes you see this kind of thing happen, and I think this is really a lesson where he doesn't have a future anymore in the NFL, and he could be facing up to 20 years in jail. So we really need to learn from this, and hopefully moving forward, nothing like this ever happens again. And then some sad news for Packers fans. Aaron Rodgers is going to be out this week with COVID. He is actually unvaccinated against popular belief. There were some people in the media who actually thought he was vaccinated because he claimed he was vaccinated in August. He petitioned to the league actually to have some sort of, not exactly, it wasn't a shot, but he had some treatment that he was trying to get petitioned to count as being fully vaccinated, but the league vetoed it. So he is out until at least November 13th, which is next Saturday before their game, so he can come back next week. But this week he will not be playing. Jordan Love will be making his first start, and they're bringing back Blake Bortles to back him up because their practice squad quarterback is also on the COVID-19 list. And the third story, Michael Thomas will not be returning to the NFL this year. He's dealing with his ankle injury. It just kind of lingered. He had a setback, and he announced that he's not going to be returning this year. Some people kind of saw this coming. I know Will for sure. We'll talk to you later. He'd been calling it from the beginning of the season that Michael Thomas wasn't going to come back, and now he's not. So that's definitely something to monitor. Do you guys think Michael Thomas deserved all that money he got in his contract? He really hasn't lived up to it, but let us know using the Media app. The Media app is a great app that I use for my fantasy football leagues as well as for answering questions. It's a virtual press conferencing app, and it's available on Google Play and the App Store, so definitely check it out. And now let's welcome in our guests. We have Will, as always, and we have Zach from Ocean State Fantasy Football. I want to thank you guys for joining.
Thank you, Zach. Thanks for having us.
No problem.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. So let's get into some guys who had some big weeks. Not necessarily the highest scorers, but guys who had kind of their season best. And do we think that this is something that can kind of move on? They can continue the momentum forward, or if that's just going to be like a one-week fluke? We'll start with the biggest one-week fluke where you got Mike White, the Jets quarterback who threw for over 400 yards. We were actually talking about this before the show. A guy bet $1,000 on Mike White to lead the league in passing, and he ended up doing it, so that guy ended up netting $125,000. Yeah, he said he had over 400 yards, but to me this isn't something I'm seeing sustainable. They're going up against the Colts defense, who hasn't been great. Xavier Rhodes, their safeties are a little banged up, with Julian Blackman being gone. I think he could still have a decent game, but I'm not expecting anything near 400 yards again. I'd say 200 yards, a touchdown, 2 touchdowns and interceptions, kind of what I'm thinking. I think the Jets will lose this game, although some people, I was reading some Jets fans' comments earlier, they were like, oh, we're going to go 3-1 during the next 3-game stretch, and they play the Colts, the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Texans. I'm like, yeah, you might be able to beat the Texans, but come on, let's get back to reality here. The Jets are not going to be winning anything. Do you guys think Mike White will be serviceable this week against Indianapolis? Do you think he will be able to compete with Zach Wilson going forward for the job? We'll start with you, Zach. What do you think?
Well, I mean, no one saw this coming, obviously. But I mean, the guy's jersey is now in the Hall of Fame. So he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, in my opinion. No, honestly though, I mean, over 400 yards, 3 touchdowns against a Cincinnati team that everyone really boasted up going into last week. But when you're going into Indianapolis, their defense not been great, but that front, they're great against the run. I think that's going to kind of take away Michael Carter. But the dump off passes, it was great for, like I just said, Michael Carter, but what do you do if you're the Jets? You know, do you go back to Zach Wilson if he's healthy? Like,
Yeah, if Mike White wins them this game in Indianapolis on Thursday night, and Zach Wilson's looking like he's going to be able to come back, do you possibly even be like, okay, he's winning games for us right now. We did just draft Zach Wilson number 2 overall. Maybe we just say he needs a couple more weeks to get healthy. What do you think, Will?
Well, I guess it depends. They're not going to make the playoffs.
No.
Nope. All you're doing winning is hurting yourself in draft position. So I don't know. I mean, I'd probably put Wilson back in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think
one more week.
I think you got it.
But
yeah, I think you can't not put Wilson back in. He's your number 2 overall pick. You saw what benching a quarterback did to his confidence last year after he was benched for Fitzpatrick after he was put back in the game, which I thought was terrible. His confidence really took a shot, so you definitely can't do that with Zach Wilson. He's going to be their franchise guy. They've committed to him going forward. So for me, they got to roll with him when he comes back. And like you said, that win against the Bengals just hurt their draft stock even more. So they really didn't do themselves any favors. Let's move on to Ryan Tannehill. With Tennessee Titans, now that Derrick Henry has been placed on IR, he will miss anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks with his injury. Ryan Tannehill has played 1 full game without Derrick Henry, and in that game he had a passer rating of 133.6. He had 3 touchdowns in that game, but like I said, it's only a 1-game stretch. Can't remember exactly who it was against. But I'm expecting the offense to kind of run a little bit more through the passing game. They did bring in Adrian Peterson. But with Julio Jones and A.J. Brown outside, you kind of have to capitalize on that's going to be where your matchups are. Adrian Peterson is not what he once was. So for me, I'm actually thinking that Ryan Tannehill will be a quarterback 1 moving forward. A low-end quarterback 1, but that's kind of where I have him, maybe around like the 8 to 12 range. What do you think, Zach? You have him around the same range? You worried about Derrick Henry not being there?
So I actually have Ryan Tannehill in one of my higher money 12-team leagues. And it's kind of been obviously an up and down season with him. More so, it's actually kind of been on the downside, what expectations were going to the season. But without Derrick Henry, that offense is so heavy on the play action. Ryan Tannehill is so effective with the play action. And if he doesn't run, use his legs, get a rushing touchdown, I think he's going to be upset. This Colts defense. I'm sorry, not the Colts defense. There's Titans are playing this week.
Yeah, they play the Rams.
Rams. That's who it was. I knew it was tough.
Another defense that was supposed to be good, but has just kind of fallen short this year.
Right. I think of Von Miller now. So, but I'm fading Ryan Tannehill this week. Long story short.
Yeah, this week I think you can fade him a little bit, but I think going forward, I think he will be in the 8 to 12 range. I have him in one of my leagues as well. Actually, in my followers league, I drafted him. And I dropped him, and then I picked him back up the last couple of weeks. And it's just really been kind of like a love-hate type thing. You play him, he does bad. You sit him, he does great. Any thoughts on Ryan Tannehill, Will? You think that they're going to start using A.J. Brown and Julio Jones a little more?
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing about I like McNichols. I think McNichols
Jeremy McNichols.
I'm not big on Adrian Peterson because, look, as a Viking fan, one thing Adrian never did well was catch the ball out of the back. He wasn't that type of running back. He was give him the ball and let him run. And so I don't know if he really helps the passing game. And honestly, if you put him in the game, it's kind of easier to defend, right? And the Vikings had that problem. That's when Adrian was at his prime. Like when Adrian was in the game, you're like, well, I don't have to really defend him on the passing game. Sometimes with the screens, but I really don't have to defend him on the passing game. So I could roll my coverage to the wide receivers and the tight end. So it'll be interesting to see how. Hey, this is Tannehill's chance to shine, right? Honestly, let's call it what it is. Tannehill can submit himself as a top 5 NFL quarterback by carrying the Titans through the rest of the year. Because I think a lot of guys are probably thinking, I'm not sure about the Titans right now. I'm not sure. Maybe I should trade high while I can get something for somebody. But
yeah, for me, I think Adrian Peterson will score more fantasy points than McNichols will this year. Mm-hmm. Just solely based on the touchdowns, he's the bigger back, and McNichols is kind of, to me, he's going to be the third down back. Yeah. So for fantasy purposes, I kind of like Adrian Peterson, but I'm not super worried about that because defenses had to worry about Derrick Henry coming out of the backfield, but it's not like he was a massive threat. They had to worry about him on screens more than anything as opposed to a guy like Christian McCaffrey running routes. But while we're on the topic of Adrian Peterson and McNichols, Zach, which one do you think is going to score more fantasy points the rest of the season?
That's tough. I think we got to give McNichols a shot. I have him as my number one waiver pickup of the week. At least for this week, I can totally see Adrian Peterson coming in and vulturing a ton of touchdowns for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
But like Will, like you were saying, he's just not the pass catching guy. He kind of never really was. So if we kind of project this offense to kind of struggle without Derrick Henry, that should kind of lead to more passing options for the backfield, and I think that goes to McNichols rather than Adrian Peterson.
The passing work were definitely in 2-minute type situations. Like McNichols will also be in the field. I think Adrian Peterson is going to be touchdown dependent.
So the question is, with all the news tonight about Odell, supposedly the team was told Odell's off the team. If that's true, and he becomes a free agent, does Tennessee have to go all in for Odell? Because that would be an interesting mix, right? To go 3 wide receiver with A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Odell. That'd be a deadly trio, but I'm not sure if that would actually work on the field. Because you'd probably have like 1 or 2 of them a game, probably, because the other ones are going to be hurt, right? So yeah. I think Odell's probably going to go to a team like the Raiders. Kind of like that situation where they kind of need a wide receiver, but
maybe the Saints.
Yeah, the Saints were interested in trading for him. We're going to talk about Odell a little later, though. So we don't want to get too far into that. Let's move on to Justin Fields. He had an amazing week last week against the 49ers. But for me, this isn't something I think that's going to be repeated. There's this guy in Chicago who kind of sucks. His name is Matt Nagy. Without Matt Nagy, everyone does good on the Bears offense, and with Matt Nagy, everyone is terrible. So for me, other than Allen Robinson is apparently terrible for fantasy. Either way, it doesn't matter who's on the field. But for me, I think he had 100 rushing yards, and I don't think that's where he's going to consistently put up. 28 fantasy points, but obviously 100 rushing yards is 10 of that right there. So if you take those away, maybe he's been averaging about 30 yards per game before that. So that just brings him down to an average week for a quarterback. To me, he does have the upside, but he's not a guy I'm excited about going forward. Will, you want to jump in here? Justin Fields' thoughts?
The Bears. Look, I really like Justin Fields. I just feel bad. Like, it's something about Bears and quarterbacks. They just ruin them. They just always do. Mm-hmm. So the best thing for Justin Fields is the Bears have a horrible season. They fire Nagy, and they bring in an offensive-minded head coach who can utilize Justin Fields' talents. But
I don't know. I don't know how Nagy still has a job.
Justin Fields plays Vikings in a couple times. He could be a good play. Looking at the remainder of the schedule, there's a few games I may play him. Teams that just haven't demonstrated to play good enough defense that he could just run. He may run for 3 touchdowns in some of these games, honestly. That 1 touchdown last week? Woo.
Yeah. Zach?
That was the breakout play.
Yeah, the 50-yard. Yeah, the 20-yard run that was actually a 50-yard. Yeah. What do you think about Justin Fields, Zach?
So
are you?
I'm on the same like Matt Nagy's got to go. I think him and Adam Gase belong to the same coaching tree as to when they exit from coaching. There's Cliff Kingsbury and there's Sean McVay, and then there's Matt Nagy and Adam Gase. And when they're gone, the players are just better, right? I mean, case in point, last week he's not there, and Justin Fields exploded.
Right.
And then the other thing too, my boy Allen Robinson, man. If you look at his quarterback history, it's arguably the saddest thing I've ever seen. This guy is elite, and he just can't. And then Justin Fields, I don't know if they have the connection, but while we're talking about Justin Fields, just want to toss it in. I was a huge fan of Darnell Mooney coming into the season, and I think that combo is going to be something serious going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too as well, especially in Dynasty, because Allen Robinson is going to be leaving the Bears after this season unless they decide to franchise tag him. I don't see a way he re-signs with them at all. He's not getting utilized properly in that Matt Nagy offense either. So yeah, I think that'll definitely be good. for both of them going forward in dynasty leagues. Let's move on to some running backs. We're going to talk about Michael Carter for the Jets. The Jets overall last week had a really good week. He had over 30 points. The thing that I'm excited about is that back-to-back weeks he's been on the field for over 70% of the time, and he's been getting the targets out of that backfield. I think it was 14 and 12 targets or something like that. But the Jets, to me, are going to be a team that's always going to be behind, so they're going to need to be throwing the ball. And then obviously he's still a good running back coming out of the University of North Carolina. It was him and Javonte, and now it's just going to kind of be him. Ty Johnson, not really excited about him. He's not a great running back. He's just kind of bounced around. The same with Tevin Coleman at this point in his career. So for me, I actually am excited about Michael Carter. I tried to trade for him in a couple leagues before the breakout game. I didn't get him because the people who had him weren't willing to give him up. But to me, I think you can start him as your RB2 going forward, especially if you're in a PPR league. The touchdowns probably won't be there, but I think he's going to see enough work through the running and passing game that he will be able to put up 10 to 15 points a game. Zach, what do you think about Michael Carter? I know you said this week you're a little worried about him, but outside of this week, are you kind of thinking he'll show up?
I another guy I have on one of my, more favored leagues. It's my dynasty league. He was my first round draft pick this past rookie draft season. And he was on my taxi squad for a while, and I was watching Jamar Chase go crazy. I was like, man, I really missed out on the first round rookies. And this last week, just due to injuries, bye weeks, whatever it may be, I just throw him in my flex, and he did what he did. But I mean, you're talking 23 targets in the last 2 weeks. How can you not like that? And if Mike White is going to continue to play quarterback until Zach Wilson comes back, and I think even when Zach Wilson comes back, how do you watch that tape and just say, we're gonna stick with Ty Johnson? It's like, obviously he got the juice, he's got the draft capital. I mean, I like him going forward. Definitely love him in dynasty. And like you said, I think he's a solid RB2 if he stays in that role.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Will?
Yeah, you know what was interesting about that game last week to me, watching it, and I actually watched a little bit of it, was the Jets looked like they were ready to play. They were excited to be in that game. Like, they didn't look like a team that was struggling. Like the Lions looked like a team that was they're probably 0-17, right? Honestly, the way they're playing. But the Jets, I mean, you could just kind of feel like maybe they're turning a corner as a team, and those players are getting excited. So yeah, I'm high on the running backs we're going to talk about. I wish I had him on my team this year, to be honest with you. I think he could be your third running back, even your RB2 during bye weeks. Maybe, depending on late in the season, could be an RB1, depending on the matchup. But what Zach said too, what makes me nervous is if Wilson comes back, is Wilson watching and learning and saying, hey, let me just dump it to this guy. Let me just do the check down. Let me not try to force things. He's a good wide receiver, good catching running back. Give him the ball. Let him go get the yards for you.
Is Zach Wilson smart enough to do that is the big question. I'm not sure. He does have some favorable matchups coming up, though. They play Miami twice, Houston and Philly. None of those defenses are great. So if Zach Wilson does learn, like, hey, let's get this guy get the yards, even a guy like Jamison Crowder who had a good week as well for the Jets because they were just kind of dumping the ball off. He got to do his thing out of the slot. Let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles backfield. This is kind of a backfield where I think a lot of people, myself included, thought Kenneth Gainwell he was going to see a majority of the work. They had Miles Sanders, and then when Miles Sanders came off the field, Kenneth Gainwell was in there. Now Miles Sanders is hurt, and Kenneth Gainwell fell to 31% of the snaps. Boston Scott actually took 45, and Jordan Howard took 25. Both of those running backs scored 2 touchdowns apiece, so they both had really good fantasy football weeks. From what I saw watching the game, Jordan Howard's going to be that goal line short yardage back, whereas Boston Scott's going to be that first and second down guy. And then if it's a third and short, Jordan Howard's coming in, and if it's a third and long, that's when you're bringing in Kenneth Gainwell. If I'm starting any of them, it's going to have to be Boston Scott. I really would prefer not to because, like I said, even when Miles Sanders was starting for this team, it was kind of a committee already with Gainwell, and Miles Sanders is, to me, a much better running back than Boston Scott. So I prefer not to start any of them, but if I'm going to have to pick one, it's got to be Boston Scott going forward based on what I saw last week. What do you think, Will? Are you...
I'm mad because I had Gainwell, and to watch Jordan Howard, I'm done with the Eagles running backs. I'm done. No, because I have a funny feeling Jordan Howard's going to get more carries now. He looked good. He looked good. He looked good running the ball between the tackles. He looked really good.
Yeah.
He did. I'm not going to be that guy that has Jordan Howard put up. If he's going to score, he's going to score on somebody else's team. Because in 2021, I cannot see myself rolling out Jordan Howard and going, I'm excited about this. I think that, Kenneth Gainwell's biggest problem was choosing the number 14 for a jersey number as a running back. That it's awful to look at. But I really like Boston Scott out of all of them. So Boston Scott looked like he had the most juice as far as, just playmaking ability. Jalen Hurts is going to Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, I don't think I saw them destroying the Lions like that. It hurts to see Dan Campbell in that position. I really would like to see them win. But, yeah, man, that backfield's gross. I think the Eagles' backfield has been gross for quite some time. It seems like every season there's something going on back there. So, Boston Scott, that's my guy.
Yeah, and even, like I said, Boston Scott would be my guy out of them, but I don't really want to have him in my lineup unless injuries or bye weeks happen. But let's move on to some wide receivers here. We're going to talk about a guy who's had 2 touchdowns last week and 4 touchdowns within the last 4 weeks. Michael Pittman Jr. for the Colts. I think people are getting, I've been on Michael Pittman Jr. for the entire season. I think he's going to be good, but I think people are starting to get a little bit ahead of themselves. Watching that game, he had the 2 early touchdowns, and after that, he had a couple big plays, but the targets, he had 15 targets, but when I was watching the game, they seemed to kind of slow down as the game went on. The Colts began to struggle, and Wentz did have those 2 interceptions. Pittman did make the big play at the end. I think you can still start Pittman as your wide receiver 2, but I see people starting to put him into that wide receiver 1 category, and you can't put him into that category yet. I don't trust the Colts offense enough. Jonathan Taylor's still going to get his work in the passing game, and then T.Y. Hilton will be in and out of the lineup. So for me, I think he'll be a wide receiver 2 going forward, but I would not put him in that wide receiver 1 category like I've seen people doing. You feel the same way, Zach?
Yeah, so I was patting myself on the back with all those other guys we brought up on my dynasty team, but I actually traded away Michael Pittman Jr. in the offseason. So wasn't the best move there, but I couldn't agree more with what you said. I love him as a player. I think that he's super talented, kind of a guy that in the 2020 draft, I wish my Dolphins would have used a draft pick on instead of Noah Inkpanagani. But I think the biggest problem that's going to keep him from getting to that wide receiver 1 elite level is Carson Wentz. I just don't think he can support the touchdowns there. You're looking at it. I mean, he had 2 last week, but up until week 7, he had 2 all season. So yeah, it's if talk about a trade, a sell high candidate right now would probably be Michael Pittman Jr. But couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I agree fully. If you can capitalize on a wide receiver 1 value off a guy who just had a massive week, I would do that for sure. As long as you can get good value in return, because like you said, I like Carson Wentz as a player. I think he's going to be good for the Colts, but I don't think he can sustain a wide receiver 1. Pittman's not going to catch 2 touchdowns every week. He'll be lucky if he gets 1 a week. But yeah, I think he's a wide receiver 2. What do you think, Will?
I can't get over Carson Wentz's interception last week.
Which one?
Yeah, right.
The one. There's only one to talk about. The left-handed in the red zone, right? It was in the red zone. I'm pretty sure it was in the red zone. And just
no, they were backed up on their goal line.
Oh, that's right.
And
that's right.
Yeah.
Pick
it was
essentially.
So it was literally a toss 6. Like the defender didn't even have to move.
Right.
I think Frank Wright came out after the game and he said that was completely on him, and I agree that it's partially on him. You don't call a screen when you're backed up inside your own 5. A screen play is not what you're calling because you kind of set your quarterback up for failure. The linemen are pulling, you're letting defenders have free reign, and Carson Wentz at that point, it was take the safety or try something. He tried something and it did not work out, and I think that kind of had him shook for the rest of the game, even though they did come down and score. He did have that interception in overtime, so I think he'll cut down. I think they'll get settled. I like that Frank Reich came out and said, that's on me, taking it off of Carson Wentz. So that's kind of has me excited for the Colts going forward as a team. I was high on them in the offseason, just the Colts in general. So it's something I'd like to see. I'd like to see them on Thursday night just come out and pummel the Jets, who beat the Titans and the Bengals. But let's move on to Chris Godwin, who's had 2 really good weeks. If you can capitalize on Chris Godwin's value right now, I would do it. Antonio Brown will be coming back, and when Antonio Brown comes back, Tom Brady has shown he will be the number 1 target on that team. Chris Godwin has really capitalized on his opportunity when Antonio Brown hasn't been there. But for me, when Antonio Brown is there, Gronk will be back as well because he's been out. He was in and out of the game last week. I think there's too many mouths to feed. If you've got Godwin, you're going to start him every week. But if you can capitalize on that, I would. What do you think, Zach?
His quarterback what Tom Brady is doing this year, I feel like we say that every year, is just insanity. So that gives me the confidence in Chris Godwin as well as the other options there. Last 4 games, you're looking at double-digit targets. So I think if he's not still leading the team in red zone targets, he was the red zone target leader for quite some time, but only rolling in 4 touchdowns in the season. So I think Chris Godwin, he's about as consistent as it gets, in my opinion. But I also agree with way too many mouths to feed there.
Yeah, I think Tom Brady's going to struggle to because Gronk's been out for a while now. When he gets back, he'll see the red zone targets. When Antonio Brown gets back, Antonio Brown and Tom Brady apparently have some sort of connection where they're just always on the same page. Not sure if that comes from living with each other or what exactly is going on there, but they seem to be inseparable when it comes to playing on the field. So for me, I'm taking Antonio Brown when he's back healthy over Godwin and Mike Evans. But I think all 3 of them can be startable and serviceable. What do you think, Will? You think you can start all 3 as well?
Well, at least for the next couple of weeks. Because, the problem with the other wide receivers on Tampa Bay is even – all of them, they're all a little bit older and they all get dinged up. So, the one consistent is Godwin, right? Off the top of my head, I don't think he's missed much time. So, he'll probably always be in the rotation some way. I don't trust the other wide receivers to stay healthy the rest of the season. I think they'll play. I don't think any of them get a season-ending injury, but it wouldn't surprise me if, Antonio Brown misses another week down the road, or Gronk will they may even rest him a couple weeks because why play him if you don't have to?
I got a question for you, Will. So you're talking about how the Bucs wide receivers are getting older, like Mike Evans, who's 28 years old. How old does that make you feel that you're calling a 28-year-old?
No, dude. When it's funny you said that because watching Adrian Peterson and some of these guys are like, wow, I was really younger when they started. Now I'm becoming the old fan, and as a Viking fan, it's nothing good about getting old as a Viking fan because it's just a reminder of how much you've been let down.
All right, let's listen to the choir.
Yeah. Let's move on to a guy who I think kind of has slid under the radar a little bit. Former cornerback Jamal Agnew had the most targets on the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. He had 12. He had 6 receptions for 38 yards and a touchdown. If you can avoid the Jacksonville Jaguars other than James Robinson, I would. But I think he could be a guy that obviously Trevor Lawrence is looking like they're going to have a connection. I thought it would be Laviska Shenault once DJ Chark went out, but he's been extremely disappointing. And Marvin Jones has been kind of up and down depending on whether he scores. So 12 targets on 6 receptions. I think he'll have some weeks where he has similar stat lines, but I would maybe pick him up if you're desperate for a play. But other than that, I think Jamal Agnew he'll have his ups and downs, he'll have his games, but you don't want to start him because when he puts up no receptions, that's going to absolutely kill your week. You feel the same way there, Zach?
Yeah, I'm not touching Jamal Agnew. I'm not touching that offense. I don't like the head coach. I'm just sick of Jacksonville because I love James Robinson so much, and it's like the disrespect of taking the ETN thing. It's just I don't like Urban Meyer. Jamal Agnew is his productivity is just the result of DJ Chark going down, right? So basically, they just kind of moved Laviska around, maybe moved to the outside, which is terrible for him. That's not where he should play. Jamal Agnew is slow, doesn't have the speed to play, slot inside. So I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah, and Will and I have both come on here and talked about our hatred for Urban Meyer as a head coach. Neither of us thought he should have got the job there. But yeah, as you said, he was a corner, and then he was a corner and a returner. And then some teams the Lions started to use him a little bit on offense, but never really took. And apparently now in Jacksonville, he's a full-time wide receiver. It's not something you see often, but it's something I'm trying to avoid. Staying in Jacksonville, though, their tight end, Dan Arnold, who had 10 targets and 8 receptions. I think that, okay, I'm going to go out here. I think that him and Trevor are actually starting to form a rapport. And tight ends, to me, once you get outside the top 5, you're kind of just hoping. Dallas Goedert's going to be up in the top 5 now that Ertz is gone because he's going to see the targets all the time. But I think Dan Arnold's kind of a guy who's going to see anywhere from 6 to 10 targets a week, and from your tight end, I think that's really all you can ask for. I don't think he's going to have that touchdown upside that, Robert Gronkowski is going to have, but if you're getting 6 to 10 targets, 4 to 8 receptions, if you're in a PPR league, you're going to be scoring some points, and at your tight end position, that's really all you can ask for. I'm a Panthers fan, so watching him with the Panthers, we didn't really use him how he was supposed to be utilized, because obviously we have Tommy Tremble, who we just drafted, and when he was in Arizona, he was getting utilized as kind of that deep. He's a big body, and I think Trevor Lawrence just kind of needs that big body, because Jamal Agnew is not that big, Marvin Jones is not that big. Vishka is pretty big, but Dan Arnold is a huge target for a young quarterback. So Dan Arnold is actually a guy who I am starting in one of my leagues this week. Because I think he will get the targets, and there's really no tight ends, because in some leagues, if you're in a 12-team league, and you've been kind of streaming the tight ends, some teams have 2 tight ends, so you're really kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, and he's a guy I think will be able to put up, if not tight end 1 numbers, he'll be high-end tight end 2, which I think is valuable on your team. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, especially like you said, the landscape of tight ends, like you said, it's a few guys, and then after that, you're throwing darts. So if you're in a position where you're streaming, you can definitely do worse than Dan Arnold. I think the best thing that happened for him is getting out of the Panthers.
Yeah.
Because trying to say Sam Darnold to Dan Arnold over and over again is just an absolute disaster. But again, he kind of unfortunately falls under the umbrella of, unless his name's not James Robinson or Marvin Jones, I don't really want to have him on my team. But if you're streaming, you can certainly do worse. Yeah,
it's going to depend on the matchup. What do you think, Will? I'm
not touching anybody on this Jacksonville offense.
All right, you're sticking to that. All right.
Until James Robinson is back. I have James Robinson, but I'm really nervous for the rest of the.
Oh, if James Robinson doesn't play this week, Carlos Hyde is going to see 30 touches. Right. Urban Meyer is going to find a way to give his former Ohio State Buckeye, the ball in his hand whenever possible.
That's enough for me to just leave my roster blank. Right. I would rather have a blank. Nobody playing in the slot, that position. No.
Yeah, I don't want to start Carlos Hyde either, but I'm saying if it does happen, if James Robinson misses time, Carlos Hyde is going to see the majority of the work out of the backfield. At the beginning of the season, Carlos Hyde was seeing more work than James Robinson. Obviously, someone came over to Urban Meyer and told him, you got to smarten up a little bit, but I don't want to really have Carlos Hyde. I think James Robinson will miss a week at most. But let's move on to another tight end who's actually the number 1 target on his team. We got T.J. Hawkinson. I've seen some people who are kind of down on T.J. Hawkinson this year. He has had about 3 to 4 bad games. But he's still a tight end 3, which says a lot about the tight end landscape. He's had 8+ targets in 6 weeks so far, and we've only played 8 weeks, so that's a pretty good number for a tight end. He's kind of guy, I don't think the Lions are going to have that many touchdowns to go around, but Jared Goff's got to throw to someone, and they really have no wide receivers. So outside of the running backs, T.J. Hawkinson's really the only one I want on that team as well. So I'm confident if you can get T.J. Hawkinson on your roster, I do for sure. And if he's on your roster, feel confident starting him every week because he's going to see the targets. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, only 2 games without less than 8 targets, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're trying to figure out his floor, I mean, you're going to find pretty comfortable spot, especially for tight ends, right?
Yeah.
The touchdowns are not going to be there because they can't score against the Eagles. They can't even get field goals against the Eagles. Again, it kills me to see my boy Dan Campbell wants to fill in Dolphins head coach, and we rallied behind him. The whole kneecap thing in the offseason, you kind of knew this was coming, but DeAndre Swift is just going to eat up all the the real fantasy work that's there. But TJ Hawkinson got him in a couple leagues. I think he's a stud.
Yeah. He's a great player.
Yeah, he is. And it's a shame, it's a shame watching really great players that if they were on another team, they'd be a top 3 in their position. And
Allen Robinson.
yeah,
Free Allen Robinson.
Can you imagine James Robinson like on Baltimore?
Yeah.
Baltimore, right?
Somewhere they oh my God.
Could you imagine Allen Robinson with
Kansas City? Imagine James Robinson on Kansas City.
Yeah, he'd be like the Kareem Hunt type thing that they've been trying to get back. I think everyone, if you got TJ Hawkinson, start TJ Hawkinson. If you don't have TJ Hawkinson, try and get yourself some TJ Hawkinson. But let's move on to the social media post of the week. We're going to be dealing with the Odell Beckham situation. His dad went on YouTube and posted an 11-minute video of Baker Mayfield missing open Odell. Obviously, Baker Mayfield came out today and said that he wasn't really mad at Odell. He was just kind of disappointed and said a conversation would go a long way if Odell just came out and started talking to him. And now Kevin Stefanski is informing the team that you should treat Odell as if he's not going to be on the team for the rest of the season. If it's literally a couple days after the trade deadline, the Saints were reportedly interested in Odell. I don't understand if this had to have been coming for a while. We kind of all saw it coming. Why not move him at the trade deadline? Because now I think they're just going to end up cutting him if he's not on the team. They're not just going to pay him to sit at home, right? If you're going to pay him, you might as well cut him and hope another team takes it on the waivers, or if they sign into a contract, you only have to pay part of it, which they probably could have got out of a trade anyways with the Saints, who are now wide receiver needy. I completely disagree with what his dad did. I think Odell's kind of in a situation now where, like Patrick Mahomes, where Odell's dad's come out and done all this stuff on social media, and the YouTube video posted that went viral. And it's kind of the same situation where Patrick Mahomes is with his brother and everything that's going on with him, and then Patrick Mahomes' mom being all over Twitter, getting in fights with people. And I think it's absolutely terrible that your family's doing this. If you're the player, there's not really much you can do about it. Obviously, Odell's had his problems with the media and everyone calling him a diva and everything, but to me, he's been pretty quiet this year. I haven't really heard any rumblings of Odell being like, I don't want to be here, like I haven't got the targets. And now all of a sudden he's not a part of the team according to the coach. So for me, it was kind of surprising to have that all happen. I'm not sure how much of that actually has to do with the video his dad posted, because for all we know, his dad posted that without Odell's consent or whatever, right? So what do you guys think of this whole situation?
I think Aaron Rodgers paid Odell's dad to do that today.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really. We all felt the same way about Odell Beckham, throughout his career, right? I felt like it was the fighting with the field goal kicking net, things like that, all the way up into this now, and it actually kind of hurts to see Odell struggle so much in Cleveland. Especially when the hype with him and Jarvis, it just hasn't panned out, and I don't know if he's washed, but he certainly does not fit in this organization whatsoever since day one. And like you said, he's in a tough position. Like that's his pops. I'm almost positive Odell wasn't like, "Hey, Dad, can you share this?" Completely embarrass me and cause a rift between me and my quarterback. So. From that angle, I think it's kind of corny, but I mean, that's his baby boy. So Pops is going to ride for his son,
Yeah, let's talk about some destinations where we can see Odell. Obviously, the Saints, the Raiders. Will brought up the Packers. If you had to guess, betting man, if you had to guess where Odell's going to land, if he gets cut, what team are you taking, Zach?
Man, that's That's tough. I mean, the Packers. That for me is like what I would like to see.
Yeah.
What I could see happening is like I think we mentioned it earlier is going to New Orleans. Think you lose Michael Thomas. I think at least probably forever with the Saints. And then the rest of the wide receivers there are tough. So Odell in New Orleans is cool, but I would love to see him in the Green Bay uniform with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. What do you think, Will?
I think the team that could jump in, it may make sense, is Arizona. Now, Arizona's kind of, to me, they're a little bit light at wide receiver. Like, there's a lot of ifs there about injuries and now Zach
AJ
Ertz,
Green's now on the COVID list.
right? And then I think Zach Ertz is probably the only person you really count on that's going to make it through the whole season.
And that's.
I hope I didn't just jinx him saying that. But if I was Arizona, they don't have a lot of cap room. The Packers could, if Cleveland is going to have to pay him the rest of his salary, so if he goes on a veteran minimum for the rest of the year, the Steelers maybe, the Chargers, they got cap space.
Yeah, and like you said, they're not going to have to pay him much because Cleveland has to pay whatever another team doesn't pay for his guaranteed money this year, which I think is $8.1 million for the rest of the season or something. So if a team signs him for $1 million, the Browns are still going to be on the hook for $7 million if they cut him.
Yeah.
For me, the Saints were a team that was interested in trading for him, but if obviously the claims, anything can happen with the claims if the Saints want him. But then they have to take on his entire contract. I think if he gets cut, he will pass through waivers. And then for me, I can't see Odell Beckham being like, yo, I'm going to go team up with Taysom Hill and Trevor Siemian for the New Orleans Saints. So I think he will look at a team like the Packers if Aaron Rodgers can convince them to look his way. But I like the Raiders more. I think him and Derek Carr would be really good together. Now they're down Henry Ruggs. With that unfortunate situation, if you pair Odell with Darren Waller coming out of there, I think that would be a really good combination. I think the Raiders are also a team that would do a move like that. They would bring in a guy like the Raiders. They would bring in a guy like Odell. So for me, if I have to pick a team where I think he's going to end up, I would probably say the Raiders.
You really want to drive Cleveland crazy? Let him go to Baltimore.
I was thinking about Baltimore, but I figure Odell might be the type of guy to just go to Baltimore just to spite Cleveland. Yeah. But I think he won't do that. I don't think that offense is really built for Odell as much as I could see him succeeding more with the Raiders. Or he would be amazing on the Packers. I'm just not quite sure the Packers organization would do that. That sounds like a kind of out-of-left field thing for them to do from everything that we've seen them do in the past. Their big offseason acquisition was Randall Cobb. There was a ton of wide receivers out there they could have had, and they chose Randall Cobb because Aaron Rodgers apparently wanted Randall Cobb over everyone. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for joining. Zach, I want to thank you for joining this episode. I hope you can come back another week. Make sure you guys check Zach out on IG at Ocean State Fantasy Football, so Ocean State FF. The graphics on that page is amazing, and the fantasy football content is great. I want to thank you for joining again, Will, as always. Make sure you check out media on Instagram and check out my page, Pro Football Craze. I do news, fantasy, kind of everything to do with the NFL. And thank everyone for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure you guys tune in next week. Thanks again, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks guys.
Zach.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
No, for sure.